Welcome to episode 7 of the Art Inside the Craft podcast. I'm your host, Jeremy Glazier, and today's episode is with Houston, Texas singer-songwriter Thomas Csorba. I spoke with Thomas late last year, shortly after the release of his self-titled album, and thought that it was one of the best albums of 2020. Thomas is an incredible singer-songwriter, and I wanted to dig into the album and find out how he ended up with Beau Bedford of the Texas Gentlemen producing, and some of those Texas gentlemen ended up playing on the album as well. We also discussed how he was doing during the shutdown and how anxious he was to get back out on the road. And funny enough, Thomas was actually out on the road when we recorded this interview. Luckily, he had some time to talk, so let's listen in on that interview now. So before we dive into the music, I saw that the album was produced by Beau Bedford of the Texas Gentlemen, and that some of his band played. I didn't get like liner notes, but it just said that they played on some of the tracks, and so I wanted to find out who all was on the album with you.
Yeah, I can send that over to you. When we started, it's funny, the Texas Gentlemen, it's such a, collection of guys more than it is a set band. At some time or another, there are probably 30 guys who have been a part of that band.
Wow.
And played on the Gents records, and their first record down they recorded at Fame. I think there were over 15 guys down there.
Wow.
They had 2 studios booked, and everybody was writing songs and recording stuff separately, and ended up putting a record together. So it definitely feels more like a coalition of guys than it does the 5 or 6 guys that they tour with. And so we kind of cherry picked some of those guys, and halfway through brought in a new drummer, and there were probably 7 or 8 guys in total that played all over the record, but all of them are part of that crew. And so it was a real gift to get to play with them. We can send over some liner notes, just so you can have those names.
Yeah, great.
But the core group of guys is Nick Lee, who plays guitar, Daniel Creamer, who plays keys, all the B3 and Rhodes, and grand piano on the record. And then Scott Edgar Lee Jr. plays bass. He played six-string bass, which is just great. And such a trip to get to watch. But and then Mackenzie Smith played drums on the first chunk of the record, and then kind of right as COVID came, we went in and tracked 3 more songs for the record. And we did those all in one day with most of the same guys, but then a drummer named Paul Grass, who now tours with the Gents. So it's such a great group of guys, and getting to be in that room and kind of watch really the way they communicate with each other is so inspiring. They all just have such a deep well of references and knowledge, not just in music, but them pulling out Loads and Dove characters and using that as a reference for how they want a guitar part to feel or whatever. That kind of stuff is so exciting to watch, and I've never made a record in such a live and exciting kind of way like that. So it was a blast to be a part of, and to just for me to bring acoustic vocal songs in there, play them for the guys, and then say, okay, let's give it a shot, and kind of let their instincts kind of rise and try to get those down on tape was such a great process.
Yeah, that I have to say, I should have mentioned this first off. Your whole album, I liked almost everything about every song. I mean, it just has such a genuine feel at every turn. The lyrics, the music, it's just, I really liked everything on it. So.
Well, thanks. Yeah, I really credit so much of that to those guys, and obviously sonically, like, there's stuff going on that I can't even comprehend. But then, on the front end, one thing Beau really encouraged of me is like, hey, we're bringing in these all-star players they're going to be able to do their job best as long as the songs are good, you know. And
Right.
I'm paying for these guys and paying for their time and their attention in the studio, and I want to make sure that the songs I have for them are worth their while and are fun for them to play on, you know.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that Beau kind of had that conversation with me on the front end, you know, like, hey, chase your song, fall in love with writing the best song you can, and it's only make the rest of the process better. So.
Yeah. Well, that is kind of a perfect segue into one of my questions about the album, actually. So the first track, I Want, that's just a powerhouse of a song. It's just, I mean, the lyrics are beautiful. And they seem, you know, as somebody just, when I listened to it for the first time, it seems like it's super self-reflective, but it's also like subtle statements on what you're seeing in the world. And so I just kind of wanted to see, like, I guess, how'd that song come together, and did you kind of specifically pick that as almost like an introduction to the album as much as it is an introduction to kind of who you are and the music you're putting out?
Yeah, the answer to that's kind of twofold. I mean, logistically, the way it happened was I played a weekend of shows with Amanda Shires around Texas, and we did Texas and then up in Little Rock, and so we did 4 shows in a weekend, and I had a different version of that song that I sang each night,
Wow.
and kind of, you know, had different verses, and afterwards kind of distilled took the best ones, threw away the ones that didn't really work, and kind of put it all together. And the way that song functions for me live is it's always been the first song I sing live ever since that weekend, as kind of a cattle call. You know, you're in these noisy bars. We played that weekend with Amanda and at the Rev Room and in Little Rock, which is a noisy bar, and I'm, you know, solo acoustic. It's kind of a way for 3 minutes for me to just yell into a microphone. You start to hear the room quiet a little bit.
Yeah.
And so that's, you know, kind of a trick that I've learned to use. But so it's functional in that way for sure, at least live. But yeah, I mean, when we were looking at a batch of tunes for the record, I told Beau, I was like, hey, I don't have any music for it. I mean, I can strum 3 chords around these lyrics, much more like a poem than a song, you know.
Yeah.
And I'm no poet, and I know that firsthand from trying to write poetry. It's not my thing.
Yeah.
I'm just no good at it. But yeah, I think, you know, Beau took it, and it didn't really have any other place than the first track on the record, you know, sonically and lyrically. I think, and I've talked about this before in other interviews, but for, you know, a white 23-year-old kid to talk about the way he looks at America, you kind of got to state your intentions before you get into things, because I think there are a lot of kids that look and sound like me on paper that maybe have the wrong motives and wrong intentions. And, I think it's important to state those things. Say, hey, here's what I'm fighting for. I hope that you'll listen to this journey we're about to go down, you know, and we've got 10 songs after that hopefully take people on that journey, you know, of portraying American life and American freedom in the, you know, modern sense of those ideas.
Yeah, it really does. It makes you kind of sit up and you listen real close to just hear, you know, everything you're saying. So it definitely hits the mark. And yeah, I just that's just a really awesome introduction to your album and everything. So and then I kind of wanted to talk just a little bit about, you put out a video for Heartache After Heartache. Another fantastic song, lyrics, musically. And the video, I'm also a photographer and kind of a camera nerd. And so that was shot on Kodak film and has a really cool like vintage vibe. And so, did you have? I mean, obviously we can talk about the song, but did you have any input into that particular process of the video or how that kind of went together? Did you have some ideas of what you wanted to do?
Yeah, so my videographer is a guy named Austin Lee, and he lives down in Austin, Texas. And he's young. I mean, he's my age and a couple years younger, but he's just phenomenal.
Hmm.
And he uses so many mediums. And we had an idea to shoot a video in the studio at Modern Electric, where we made the record. But the idea kind of evolved, and he introduced me into Super 8 cameras and film. And that video was so fun and hard to make. It's a 3.5 minute, 4 minute song, I think, and we had only, I think, 11 minutes of film that we shot the whole thing on.
Wow.
And obviously, when you're shooting a video on film, it can get pretty expensive pretty quickly.
Sure.
And I told Austin, I was like, hey, we have very little margin for error. And we pulled it off. So it was a blast to do. But Austin, he made all the music videos for the record. One for Another Man in Me, and one for Crooked Kind of Free. And all of the, promo, Spotify Canada stuff. And honestly, it was that side of putting this record out was a huge, it's so far away from the time we spent in the studio and the time I spent making the songs, writing the songs, that it kind of breathed a new sense of life, at least for me, in making the project, kind of right as the songs were coming out. So I, love him to death, and I'm so grateful for his work. But that video in particular was fun to shoot here in my neighborhood in Dallas. And I learned a lot about film and what it's like to pull something off on a budget. I think we were looking back, it was kind of foolish the way we did it, but it turned out all right.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting how guys that are kind of at your level in the music game are really getting involved in almost every aspect now of their from like video production or how it's going to look. I mean, it's really cool to see because you're really taking control of exactly putting out exactly who you are. So it's been kind of fun to see music evolve that way.
Yeah, I think that's an important part of it. I mean, at the end of the day, I'm a small business owner, and
Yeah.
For my buddies who own a coffee shop, if they're not worried about how they're restocking toilet paper, or in my case, like how I'm shipping out merch and where to buy vinyl mailers from, and also things like how to pull off a video like that for such a small budget. It's like all of it is part of my business, and as a small business owner, you kind of have to get in the weeds, and I'm better for it, for having to worry about that kind of thing.
Definitely.
So, it's definitely part of the landscape these days. There's so much room, kind of in between the Billie Eilishes of the world and the guys who are playing open mics every Wednesday night at the local wine bar.
Right.
There's room in the middle if you're willing to get your hands dirty to make a living, and figure out how to shoot your own videos and hire the right kind of people and do it on a budget.
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely, I mean, that definitely worked. And that's why I kind of asked that question is because it just seemed, again, I hate to keep saying it, but it's just so genuine, it's hard to find music. I mean, it's out there, but you got to really look for the music that's genuine. And when you listen to it, it's just not a pattern of the same other 5 songs that you just listened to. So,
I appreciate that.
yeah. And so the album, it's got a real great mix of ballads and kind of different musical genres I'm hearing when I listen to it, and I just kind of wanted to talk a little bit about your songwriting. Do you kind of sit down to specifically write songs like Plastic Jesus or Highway Kid? Those are a little more kind of upbeat, a little more not not to say not ballady, but they're a little more fun, I guess I would say. And
Yeah, a little playful.
yeah. And so I guess kind of what's your process like when you're writing songs and like you said with the guys coming in and playing those songs, you just kind of brought them in and they kind of helped some of the stuff that happened as far as sonically goes. I guess how's that all work for you?
Yeah, I'd like to think of myself as a really disciplined writer, but frankly, I'm just not. Uh, I'm, ideally, I'm waking up and sitting down and writing, um, and I have friends that are able to do that and write really prolifically, if that's a word.
Yeah, sure.
That just breeds songs. They can sit down and 30 minutes later something's there. That's not quite how it works for me. I think I have kind of constant ideas floating around or just buried in the voice memos or the notes section of my phone. And I'll often have to come back and readdress them and say, oh, that idea is not too bad, and try to flesh it out. And that's how a lot of the songs, were for this last record. Towards the end of last year and the beginning of 2020, I really started co-writing at a pretty, crazier pace than I ever have, just because I've had so much time on my hands and been able to write over Zoom and FaceTime with friends kind of across the country. And so I think I'll be able to see more of that on my next record. Some of those songs pop up. And the great thing about co-writing is there's somebody else there to make sure something gets written, when somebody else is on the other side of the table, there's no like, oh, maybe I need to go for a run, or it's been 45 minutes since I've taken the dog out, I need to go do that, or whatever kind of distractions inevitably arise. Co-writing is a way to kind of keep your brain there and making the song happen. So I don't know if that totally answered your question, but yeah, a lot of those songs were kind of floating ideas that once I put a date in the calendar, like, oh crap, I've got to have this finished by this day that we're getting in the studio. Usually I can throw something together.
Yeah. And
flesh them out.
when did you actually like finish recording and start putting? Because I know the album came out in September, and so this is obviously a very odd time for artists who kind of rely on touring and getting things out to have to kind of stay locked down and to get an album out. It's really tough. So how long was it actually between when you like finished recording and decided, hey, we're putting this out in September?
It was quite a while. I mean, I started making the record September of or August of 2018.
Oh, okay.
And we had the bulk of the songs finished. Sent it off to mixing and mastering, got it back, and then from then until February, when COVID started happening, I talked to my producer and buddy, Beau, and I said, hey, I've got, 3 songs that I think are really good and can fit on this record. And obviously at that time, it's like, am I going to put this record out in the spring? Am I going to wait? What's the deal?
Right.
And so, we got in the studio and recorded those last three songs. So, it was kind of, and I guess at that point, we got in the studio probably March. I think this whole year was a little bit, a show, and it got canceled, and that was the last trip I've been on really for playing. Came home. There were no like lockdowns or anything yet. Dallas County hadn't done stay-at-home orders, but I knew that we were going to have kind of a hibernation season. And we got in the studio, I think, at the end of that month, to track those 3 songs. So they were quote-unquote finished versions of the record at multiple points along the way. But I'm grateful that the folks around here were kind of saying, hey, wait, do it right. And we put out in September, and I'm grateful. Obviously, would love to be touring my record, but really grateful for the response we've gotten, and grateful that people would listen and buy vinyl just from my web store, where often that happens at the merch table. I've been very grateful and very blessed to have people that dig music enough to not see me live and buy records online anyway.
Are you able to do many I guess like live shows kind of virtually now, or what I guess how are you kind of getting the word out right now?
I did a big virtual tour that we did in conjunction with Luck Reunion on their streaming platform, and that was Austin, who shot the Heartache video. He shot that as well. What we essentially did is made a 3-part mini documentary of me playing through the record at various venues that have meant a lot to me over the years. And so that was a big project we were working on, and released that at the beginning of this month, end of October and the beginning of this month. And really grateful for how that turned out. As we look kind of to 2021, we're starting to get holds on dates, and hopefully we can get out there to play some shows, but I'm kind of in the camp of it's obviously not worth it if it's gonna put people in harm's way. So I'm trying to be patient, but yeah, doing some virtual stuff. There are plenty of ways to continue to spread the word and put content out there. But I sure do miss playing, that's for sure.
I want to again thank Thomas for coming on the podcast to talk about his music. He's an extremely talented singer-songwriter, and I look forward to following him as he continues through his career. You can drop by his website for tour dates or to pick up an album, and I'll link his website in the description. I also want to thank Justin Schmidt from Missing Piece Group for setting up the interview and sending Thomas's music my way. As usual, thanks to Pure Mountain Coffee and Black Cat Bone Productions for supporting the show. Feel free to follow Black Cat Bone Productions on Instagram for more episodes, and until the next time, I'll see you all down the road.